My name is Sophie, and at 22 years old, I've learned that the coldest days aren't always about the weather outside, but the chill that can sometimes settle deep in your heart. I live in Minneapolis, a city of resilient spirits, but even here, winter can feel like a relentless enemy. Every morning, I woke before dawn, the sky still a bruised purple, and started my day. My small apartment was on the third floor of an old building, the kind where the heating never quite reached every corner, no matter how high I turned the thermostat. I'd pull on layers of clothes, usually the same two sweaters, both a little threadbare, and make my way to the coffee shop where I worked. The smell of freshly brewed coffee was a comfort, and the steam rising from the espresso machine was a welcome warmth against the biting cold that seemed to seep into my bones. My dream, the quiet beacon that kept me going, was to save enough money to go back to community college. Not for anything grand, just to get a business certificate, something practical that could help me find a job with a stable salary, a job that could make a real difference in my life and maybe even help my younger brother, Leo, when he finished high school. He deserved a shot at something better than the endless struggle I felt trapped in. But sometimes, when I was alone scrubbing floors after closing, the fear would creep in, whispering that I wasn't smart enough, strong enough, or simply worthy enough to escape this cycle. It was my internal nemesis, that persistent voice of doubt, telling me I was destined to just keep treading water, always on the verge of sinking. I worked every hour I could get at the coffee shop, often picking up extra shifts, my feet aching by the end of the day. On weekends, I cleaned offices downtown, pushing a heavy cart, the smell of industrial cleaner clinging to my clothes. I squirreled away every spare dollar, imagining the tuition payments, the textbooks, the freedom of a future not dictated by minimum wage. I ate mostly ramen noodles and instant oatmeal, skipping meals if it meant another $5 for my savings jar. I was doing everything right, I thought. I was climbing, slowly but surely. Then came the first blow. My landlord announced a significant rent increase, effective immediately, citing rising property taxes. It was a cruel twist, an unavoidable expense that chipped away at weeks of hard-earned savings. Just as I was trying to recover from that, Leo had a minor accident playing basketball and needed an urgent trip to the doctor for some stitches. He was fine, thankfully, but the emergency room bill, even with a basic insurance plan, was a gut punch. It drained almost half of my tuition fund. I felt like I was running up a never-ending escalator, making progress only to be dragged back down. I started to take on a third job, delivering pizzas in the evenings, my ancient car barely holding together, its heater unreliable. One frigid night, the engine sputtered, coughed, and died in the middle of a delivery. I had to walk the rest of the way, the pizza getting cold, the customer understandably frustrated. The tow truck bill, then the repair shop's estimate, felt like a joke designed to break me. I couldn't afford to fix it, and without my car, I couldn't do the deliveries. My income plummeted again. I remember staring at my savings jar, now almost empty, the small pile of crumpled bills looking pathetic. The dream of college felt like a childish fantasy. It was mid-December, and Minneapolis was locked in a deep freeze. A heavy snowfall had blanketed the city, and the wind chill made walking outside feel like torture. I had just received an eviction notice. My landlord was selling the building, and all tenants had to vacate by the end of January. Finding an affordable apartment in Minneapolis, especially in winter, felt impossible. I had nowhere to go, no savings, no car, and my brother was counting on me. That night, I was supposed to meet with a representative from a low-income housing program, a last desperate attempt to find somewhere to live before I was truly out on the streets. I walked to the bus stop, the snow crunching under my worn boots, the wind howling around me, cutting through my thin coat. My fingers and toes were numb. My heart felt the same way, numb, heavy, completely hollow. I stood there, shivering, watching the minutes tick by on the frozen bus stop sign. The bus was late, of course. Everything was late. Everything was going wrong. I felt the tears freezing on my cheeks, invisible in the biting wind. Giving up felt like the only option left. I didn't know how much more I could take. Just as I felt the last shred of hope shrivel inside me, a shadow fell over me. A woman, older than me, perhaps in her late 50s, with kind eyes framed by a thick scarf, shuffled up to the bus stop. She carried a large, worn canvas bag and seemed just as cold as I was, though she looked more prepared, wrapped in a thick, quilted coat. She glanced at me, her eyes lingering on my visibly shaking frame. Without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out something metallic and crinkly. It was an emergency blanket, the kind hikers use, thin and silver. She unfolded it slowly, the material crinkling softly in the silence, and then, to my utter surprise, she held it out, opening it wide. "Here, darling," she said, her voice a little raspy but warm. "There's enough for two. We can share the warmth until the bus comes. No sense in freezing alone." My breath hitched. I hadn't realized how truly alone I felt until that moment. I nodded, unable to speak, and she moved closer, wrapping one side of the blanket around my shoulders and pulling the other around herself. The metallic material wasn't thick, but it held my meager body heat close, and almost instantly, I felt a tiny spark of warmth begin to spread through my chilled skin. More than the physical warmth, it was the warmth of her unexpected kindness, the simple, selfless act of sharing that melted some of the ice around my heart. "My name is Evelyn," she said softly, "and this winter has been a cruel one, hasn't it?" We stood there, two strangers, huddled together under a shimmering silver blanket, sharing not just warmth but a quiet understanding. We talked a little, mostly about the weather, but also about the small kindnesses that keep people going. She told me she was heading to the soup kitchen to volunteer, and that she'd found herself out of work a few years back and remembered how much a hot meal and a warm smile meant. It wasn't about her giving me money or solving my problems. It was about her sharing a moment of human connection, a reminder that I wasn't invisible, that there was still goodness in the world. When the bus finally arrived, 30 minutes late, she gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "Hang in there, Sophie," she said, as if she'd known my name all along. "Spring always comes, even after the longest winter." That small act, that shared blanket, that simple conversation, became my turning point. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough to rekindle a tiny flame inside me that I thought had been extinguished. I still went to the housing meeting, and even though the options were scarce, I approached them with a renewed determination. I found a temporary room in a communal house that was a little far from my job, but at least it was warm and affordable. I started walking or taking long bus rides, using the time to read library books about small businesses. I didn't give up on college. Instead, I saved every penny from my coffee shop job, and with the help of a small, unexpected grant I applied for, inspired by Evelyn's words about not giving up, I enrolled in just one online class that spring semester. It was slow, but it was progress. My new normal wasn't easy. I worked hard, studied harder, and I made sure to save a portion of my income for my brother's future, as well as for my own. But something fundamental had changed within me. I now saw the world through a lens of connection, not just survival. I remembered that silvery blanket, that shared space, and the feeling of not being alone. I started volunteering at a local community center on my days off, helping people fill out job applications or simply offering a listening ear. I even began knitting simple, warm scarves and hats in the evenings, leaving them anonymously on benches at bus stops during the coldest nights, tucked into small bags with a note that simply said, "Stay warm. You are not alone." It was my way of paying forward the kindness I had received, a silent testament to Evelyn's simple generosity. Years passed. I finished my certificate, got a job as an administrative assistant at a local nonprofit dedicated to helping homeless youth, a job where I truly felt like I was making a difference. My brother was thriving in college. One bitterly cold January evening, walking home from work, bundled up against the Minneapolis chill, I passed a familiar bus stop. And there she was, Evelyn, older now, perhaps a little more fragile, but unmistakably her. She was sitting on the bench, not waiting for a bus this time, but carefully unwrapping small, warm sandwiches and handing them out to two young people huddled together, clearly struggling with the cold. Her face lit up as she offered them a thermos of hot cocoa. I paused, watching her, a quiet smile on my face. Our eyes met across the snow-dusted street. She didn't seem to recognize me at first, then something shifted in her gaze, a flicker of recognition. She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile, and I smiled back, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the freezing air. It was a silent acknowledgement, a beautiful, unexpected twist of fate that proved Evelyn's words were true. Spring always comes, even after the longest winter, and kindness, like warmth, is meant to be shared.